Okay, I'd like to convene the February meeting of the Governance Committee. Approval of, do we have any speakers? Do we have any public speakers? No, we do not. Okay. Approval of minutes from last month. Can I have a motion? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I'd like to have approval of the committee work plan.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. As we start off, I'd like to make a few comments. For those of you that sat through many of the operating committees today, I made a specific ask of the chairs of the operating committees and the agency heads to go through a safety presentation to give the board members a feel for the breadth and depth of the safety endeavors at each one of the agencies so that you would have a better understanding of all that is done. Unfortunately, sometimes in the compressed schedule that we have in terms of the operating committee reports and the safety report itself, we're not able to embellish all that we do. So I thank you for listening to that today. I also would like to make sure that you're aware of the fact that I've decided that we really need to go back to a safety committee format. At one time we had a safety and security committee. I think it's important that we devote a certain amount of time to the board to be able to focus on safety issues, whether they be specific to an agency or cross-arching across a number of agencies, so that we can have a senior level focus. Consistent with that, I've established a senior corporate safety position within the MTA, probably be staffed by a very modest number of people. The role of that position is not to tell the operating agencies what to do. I do not want to blur the lines of accountability. The chief officer of each agency, the president of that agency, has to be accountable for the safety of that agency. But we need to be able to assure ourselves that the resources that they need are available. That's what I'm going to ask of that person, as well as whatever support they can provide to them to make sure that they're doing the best in safety. And lastly, if they're not, they have the ability to deal directly with the agency head or come to me if something is being missed. I think it's an important part of the governance structure. The last thing that I'd like to mention, but you heard it, is I had a discussion with each one of the agency heads regarding the reporting structure of the chief safety person within each of the agencies. And at two agencies, there were reporting structures that were different than the others. In almost all the agencies, the senior safety person reported directly to the CEO, the president. In a couple of them, they did not. And in one of the agencies, there was actual additional responsibilities more than just safety. And what there was a unanimous agreement on is that the safety function should be dedicated solely to safety so that it's undiluted, and that person should report directly to the CEO, to the president. So in the case of bridges and tunnels, that change was made. In the case of Long Island Railroad, that was made. And in the case of Metro North, it wasn't a change in reporting relationship as much as it was a segregation of the safety duties versus the security duties, and the safety person is solely responsible for the safety in that agency. And I wanted to make sure all the board members knew that. Okay, with that, I guess, Lamont, I think you're going to take us through a revision to the MTA Code of Ethics.
That's correct. As you can see on page 5 of your committee book, we are making a recommendation to change certain provisions of the MTA Code of Ethics to strengthen the controls that we have over the outside activity of certain of our employees, and also to codify certain practices that we are currently engaged in. First of all, we are recommending a change on page 9, which is entitled Certifications. Currently, all new hires at the MTA are required to certify to both receiving and complying with the MTA Code of Ethics. The new section codifies that current practice, but it also allows us to do what are called recertifications on an ongoing basis, so that on a regular basis we'll have employees recertify to compliance with the Code of Ethics. In addition, on page 14 of your committee books, we are also making a recommendation that we change a provision related to outside activity. Currently, employees who hold policy-making positions are required to obtain approval for the MTA for certain types of outside activities, outside employment. This practice requires that if any of the outside activity changes, or if their position within the MTA changes, that they have to go through a process of getting a new or reapproval. What we are trying to do is put in some additional controls in place by requiring that not only that when they have a change in their employment, both their MTA employment or their outside activity that's been approved, but that on an ongoing basis, we're recommending every 3 years that they recertify to us that there have been no changes. We're putting this control in place just to make sure that we re-emphasize the importance of this and to give employees an opportunity, if they haven't done so, to come forward and make the appropriate disclosures. Those are the recommendations in terms of the changes to the Code of Ethics.
Do we need to vote on that?
Could I just ask a question? Is this the entire Code of Ethics?
No, I was actually asked to just provide the sections that related to the changes today. The actual code is approximately 44 pages, if I remember correctly.
And
It is available on our website as well as...
And does it apply to the board as well?
There's a separate Code of Ethics for the board.
Is that being amended in any way?
It is not. Your outside activities are not subject to my approval.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Motion we accept. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. The next item on the agenda is the review and approval of revisions to the board committee charters.
Yes, on page 17 of your committee book, we are recommending 2 changes. One to the Finance Committee and one to the Governance Committee. These are really minor technical changes. To the Finance Committee, we are recommending that it explicitly allow the MTA's new Chief Procurement Officer the right to bring procurements to the Finance Committee. In the charter as currently drafted, there is no provision for the Chief Procurement Officer to be able to move procurements through Finance. So we are adding that language in. And as it relates to governance, we're amending it to remove an out-of-date provision that created what we call an internal inconsistency in the charter. The charter provided that the MTA chairman had to be a member of the governance committee. However, the out-of-date provision also said that no member of this committee could also be an employee of the MTA. So we are removing that inconsistent provision from the charter.
Motion made. Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Did anybody notice these two inconsistencies? You just mentioned them?
No.
The next item on the agenda is the review of the MTA whistleblower protection policy, and is that you again,
Yes.
Lamont?
Yes. Each year, through practice, we review the MTA whistleblower protection policy, which was last revised in June 23rd of 2010. We're not recommending any revisions to that policy at this time.
Motion to approve? A motion to approve?
Motion made.
A second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. The last item on the agenda is the subject of the review of the board committee schedule. There's been a number of comments raised by committee members, actually board members, with respect to our ability to conduct our business within time frames that we have for the month. On the Monday, the committee meeting is exceptionally difficult, and also some of the meetings we have in front of the board meeting. And so Kathy is going to give a summary of the things that we're looking at.
Hi everybody, it's I guess particularly appropriate that we should be having this conversation today when we're about an hour and a half behind schedule, and that's kind of been the pattern over the course of the past couple of months. You may remember, I think all of you, actually except for you Mr. Mueller, I think were on the board at the time when Joe Loda first took over, and we did an informal survey of the board members to see if they had any preferences or strong feelings about changing the way that we schedule our committee meetings. And at that point in time it was close, but there was sort of a sense that we should kind of stay with the way things are now. You may recall a few years back we used to have some meetings the week before the board meeting. I think sometime under Jay's tenure, all the committee meetings were moved to the Monday before the board meeting, which was on the Wednesday. We can keep things that way. There are some variations, so I'm going to run through a couple of options that we've identified as potentially helpful in terms of moving things along on Mondays. Option number one is the no action option, I guess, which is to keep things the way they are now. The convenience of that is that people only have to make 2 trips. You don't have to make an extra trip the week before. And we'll continue in any event to use Wednesdays for one of the meetings of the smaller committees. We started to do that a while ago. We'd have audit meet on Wednesday morning, so that also shortens Monday a little bit. But, you know, the disadvantage is, because today is one of those days. Meetings tend to run long, the afternoon can be very late, and as was the case today, you sometimes have trouble making a quorum for the meetings that fall at the very end of the day. So that's the problem with the way that things operate now. Option number 2 would be kind of keep the way things are now, but move Metro North Committee meeting up a half an hour or an hour. That's going to help a little bit. It may make it easier to obtain a quorum for meetings at the end of the day. You're going to inconvenience board members who have to get here a little bit early. You're still going to have the potential of meetings running long, making it difficult for board members to schedule things and know when meetings start and end. Option number 3 would be to retain the current schedule, but just a lot more time for each board meeting. So, if the railroad meetings, for example, have been running late recently, so maybe just allot a little bit more time to the railroad meetings, that gives you the benefit of predictability, but you don't really have any improvement in terms of the days running long, not making quorums at the end of the day. So those are the disadvantages that would be attached to just adding more time to each individual board meeting. The next option, I think, would be to retain the current schedule, but do our best to shorten the presentations at each of the committee meetings. The committee meetings run long because they're jam-packed with a lot of information, a lot of opportunities for questions. That can be good, but a lot of, especially at the operational committee meetings, there's a lot of information presented that's already in the book. The repeating of that information and answering questions related to that information tend to make the meetings run long. It is what it is. So one way of getting at that issue would be just to come to some sort of consensus among the board members as to how we can shorten and tighten the actual committee meetings themselves. So keeping the regular schedule, but making the committee meetings shorter so that we can actually get into the allotted time. I think the final option would be to kind of go back to the way things were a couple of years back, where we actually take a couple of the committee meetings and move them to the week before. So an example would be maybe you move Long Island and Metro North to the Friday before. That will shorten your Monday. You will have a shorter Monday, but the obvious disadvantage to that is that certain of the board members who are on that committee will have to make 3 trips. And we're going to be moving to 2 Broadway, so you're going to have to make 3 longer trips for most of you in the event that we decide to go to that option. So I think we wanted to get the board, and it seemed appropriate to bring this to governance committee to start thinking about this a little bit. It's obviously an inconvenience for everybody. It's a problem that doesn't seem inclined to go away. And we wanted to get people thinking about how they thought, the best way to skin this cat was. And I know that Tom has some thoughts about this.
The issue of how we've met and what's transpired at meetings has been an ongoing issue my entire career at the MTA. And as Kathy has said, we've not vacillated, but moved across a number of different things. I don't think there's one easy solution. I gravitate toward either 4 or 5. And the reason I gravitate toward either 4 or 5 is the first 3 are more of the same. And what's the definition of can you do the same thing without changing? It's I forget the definition, but it's ridiculous. But it's insanity. And these are non-paid positions. Your participation as a board member or committee member is essential. If we want to be transparent as an agency, we need to have the dialogue, and that's why I say I gravitate toward 4 or 5. I have never worked in an organization where we publish as much information as we do, and we certainly do. We put it in the board committee agendas. We give the reports in there, and there's plenty of opportunity. Maybe I would even make a commitment if there was a concern that you get it too late, we could examine the idea of giving it to you earlier so that you can take a look at it. But there's a lot of information in those reports that are submitted and provided to board members. And I could ask the staff to shorten their presentations to deal with just the high points. I mean, there are certain statistics that are read over and over again, and if the numbers aren't changing and the trends are remaining the same, it's taking up time that could be better spent in doing other things. The other thing is on category 5 is to go back to the 2 commuter railroads on Friday. But that does require those people that are members of the committee to have to come 3 different days during a month and 2 on either side of a weekend, which would be difficult when you've got other things that you've got responsibilities for. So I think that's my recommendation, that we look at 4 and 5, but I'm not closed-minded to taking a look at the other ones. Bob?
Well, I had suggested it some time ago that we move the full board meeting to a later time on the Wednesday, freeing up more time in the morning for the non-operational committees to meet. And I still think that's a pretty good idea. Move it to, say, noon or 11:30 or 11. I don't see there's anything sacrosanct about the morning. Even we could even do it in the afternoon, but just give that a possible thought of moving that and have it more in the morning.
We had done that already when we pushed, you'll recall the board meetings used to be at 9:30, and we pushed it back somewhat to allow some of the smaller committees to meet on Wednesday morning, so typically audit will meet on a Wednesday morning. One of the reasons, and this is something that the board should consider, that we haven't wanted to put some of the larger committee meetings on for Wednesday morning is that typically they have action items. So we want to give the board the opportunity to actually, think about the action that they'll be taking as a full board. So we haven't wanted to sort of cram a lot of action items in Wednesday morning and expect the board to be able to make a decision and a vote, right after that. So we typically don't have a lot of, I don't think we really have any action items on the Wednesday morning. They tend to be the committees that, diversity or audit, where there typically aren't action items reported out to the full board.
Or governance,
Or
all
yeah.
kinds of committees
Yeah.
that don't have these action
Exactly,
items.
which is what we do
And
now.
now we only have one committee meeting on Wednesday, and we could have two, or even three, but if there wasn't an action committee.
Well, but
Yeah.
the drivers,
Yeah.
the drivers of time on the Monday
Yeah.
are the two railroads, New York City Transit, Bridges and Tunnels is pretty much right on the money in terms of timeliness. Thank
Right.
God for it. Went simple, but CPOC is a complicated issue too. And generally, when and finance, you can't forget finance, because in many cases, that is, I think we used to have finance on a different day, but there was concern to move
Yeah.
it up, and then have a day of layover for the board members to review that which they didn't hear because they weren't at meetings, so that when action was going to be taken at the board meeting, they have the time to be able to digest that, have a conversation with the chairman or the vice chair or other board members. And so we would almost have to, Bob, break up one of those meetings and move it till Wednesday if we wanted to stay with the 2 days. So it would have to be either CPOC, finance, or one of the three large operating agencies, and that may be difficult to do. John?
I think that clearly we start off in Metro North and I'm on it and I ask questions, so I don't try to overdo the questions. There are lots of questions, there are lots of materials, and during my tenure it's been the way, the last 2.5 years only, it's been the way, the schedule's been the way it is. It clearly doesn't work. But one of the reasons the meetings last longer is we get the materials too close to the meeting. If I represent entities and firms in front of public entities for my day job. And we always have a requirement to get the materials on things that are a lot simpler, no offense to my clients, than this. A week ahead of time, we're getting these materials that are voluminous and complicated, sometimes, most of the time, late Thursday or Friday, either on a holiday week, a holiday weekend with Monday meetings, and that's causing us to not have time to call up and ask a question that perhaps we could ask outside of the meeting, so we ask it in the meeting, which drags the meeting on, which leads to someone else asking a question, which leads. So I think part of the fault lies in the fact that we get our materials too close to the meeting. But I will say it's not working the way it is now, and I commend you for bringing it up. Any of the solutions, maybe the board meeting in the afternoon with committees Wednesday, but clearly the Metro North and the LIRR, of which on which I serve, are causing the problem, and then you catch up. So you have to do something with those meetings. Starting them even earlier is ridiculous. It won't work. But I would say that perhaps having them, for justifiable reasons, in Midtown, even when we move, those two committees, given what they are, might be something to explore. But I would say either move those two, but don't move them earlier. That's just not going to work.
I mean, we currently allot an hour for each one of those committees, right?
They always take longer than an hour.
Yeah, but I just beg the question. I mean, when you take a look at the footprint of New York City Transit, inside of an hour and a half, by and large, we get a lot covered. And the number of procurements are more, the operating reports are longer, or whatever. But the reason for this was to have a dialogue and get the opinion of the board
we're
members.
local yokels upstate, so it takes us a little longer. But Tom, we don't get our materials till
That's
Friday.
a valid point.
That causes a lot of the delay. I think.
I'll make a commitment to talk to Bob and talk to other people in terms of possibly moving that up. The other thing we're doing is we're moving to an automated way of getting you the information, which will speed up. You don't have to do the printing. Well, I guess you still do have to do the printing, but not for the board members, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard about this. We've procured a product called Director's Desk, which will allow you to be able to access the board materials and have it refreshed electronically. So I think the ability to get the materials out to you seamlessly and then update the information will be greatly enhanced once that product comes online, which should be sometime later this year. So that will help, I think, enormously.
Fred?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ballins, having referred to himself as a local yokel, awakened me. It's a little like Sam Irvin calling himself a country lawyer. But it also reminds me that although he's right about when material lands at us, and presumably when we get to our new location and we do director's desk and we'll have an ability, since I get mine electronically now, but it's still in PDF format and you have to still play with it. When it's in BoardLink or Director's Desk or one of those software programs, we'll be able to spend a little more quality time with it. And I'm one of those people who after a long Monday has a headache. But I understand why. This is important, substantive public service. So it's a privilege. I'm not going to complain about it. And the questions are a necessary part of it. Even though sometimes we will walk out of the room and bang our head against the wall inside the conference room while some of these questions are going on, they're important. And they need to be asked. And if they take a little time, my own personal view is they take a little time. I've gotten accustomed to these things running a little late, so I don't make any plans for the rest of the day. However, those of us with other obligations need some other days with which to make some plans. So to split this or move this to another day would cause some of us some difficulty.
Well, you know what? I didn't mean to tar staff with it's not. It's no one's fault.
Right.
And I agree with Freddie. It's a privilege, and the questions are important. Maybe we just spread them out a little so people aren't coming at 10:30 for the subway bus, New York City Transit, which is clearly not starting at. Has it ever started at 10:30? Because Metro North, and it's not Jim. It's not our fault. It's just there've been a lot of complicated things going on.
Well, maybe one of the things I can do is we're not going to change the level of reporting we put in print or we put in automated format when we get to the director's desk, okay? But maybe I can start to ask the agency heads to trim the presentations from a standpoint of the verbiage they actually use and focus on just the high points. I mean, because, it would be prepared for me. I'd tailor it to my speaking style, but there's some stuff that was in there that was almost like rote memorization, and I don't know how significant it was. Now, when we had the 1 month, October, we had the 1 day, the 1 month, we had 5.9 million people ride. We should make that kind of statement, and we shouldn't have that just buried in there. But if it's the same old, I don't know if it makes sense to have to verbally state it, because it just adds up time. Because when you go through each one of the different members on each committee, there's a lot of reports. So I could start that way. Make sure that and then if you see that action go too far in terms of the verbiage getting too little, we can factor it back. Is that a reasonable approach?
I think that's a great approach, and I think that's one we should definitely adopt.
Because I agree with Freddie. I don't want to
information.
constrain. I'm sorry. We don't want to constrain questions. That's what the board is here for, to ask questions. Mark?
I sort of like Kathy's option number 2. For those of us that have day jobs, making 3 trips here rather than 2 trips is really tough. But starting Metro North earlier, Jim Sidor, who's the lifetime chairman, could get here at 6 a.m. If you had the Metro North meetings at 6 or 7 a.m., that would limit public speakers, it would limit attendance to just a bare quorum, and it would speed up the whole rest of the day and you get through everything.
It would limit it.
Mr. Sidor.
Yeah. And since I don't have to attend, it won't interfere with my day, because I usually start at 6:15. But
My question was, start early. How early were you here? We start 8:30 now. 8 o'clock isn't going to make much of a difference.
No, I don't think it'll make much of a difference, and you stay a lot, like on a governance day, and you're here all day, so it lengthens the day. I think I will ask the agency heads to see if what they can do to reduce the amount of verbiage they have. We do not want to change the level of reporting that we actually submit in writing or make available to the board. And we try to trim those presentations to get to the point and have them focus on deltas, changes that occur in prior months, highlight certain areas rather than state the same.
The one thing that I've done over the years is if I get the stuff early enough, I read through it. If I got a question, I'll track down someone to ask the question so that I don't have to waste time in a full board meeting.
That'll be the second thing. I'll make an ask of Bob to see if we can increase the amount, move up the time we give you the information. Because for the exception, for the items that need to be a walk-on, there'll always be walk-ons. We can handle those as an exception, but the majority of the information get to you in an earlier format.
We can also look for opportunities to move more stuff to Wednesdays, because it's sometimes you do have two of the smaller committees meeting in a particular month. So there may be opportunities to do 2 meetings before a Wednesday meeting and then make the day a little bit shorter. You know, if audit and diversity, for example, meet the same month, maybe you do both of those on a Wednesday.
And if we add the safety committee, we're going to have to figure out when to do that.
Yeah.
But something tells me we may not necessarily have to force the safety committee in the same exact time frame as this, but we'll sort that issue out.
Does safety need to meet every month, or can you do it every other
We're
month?
looking at the issue of either quarterly or monthly, but I think initially we're talking about quarterly.
Right. And the expectation is we have another very brief governance committee meeting next month to have you approve some reports. So the expectation is we're going to bring you the safety committee charter at that point in time, which I think is going to propose quarterly meetings, but you'll have to approve that safety committee charter at next month's governance committee meeting.
And I don't want the safety committee to totally subtract from the operating. Each one of the agencies should still do a brief safety, especially on an item that's of concern to them, that they have to. Metro North, for the indeterminate future, are going to have to be reporting on the actions related to the deep dive and to the other items, and that needs to be reported monthly. Whereas the safety committee would be at a more overview level.
You know, in safety, we learn a lot about what New York City Transit does for safety, which would have been directly applicable to Metro North, for example. And you learn as you sit on the different committees what one agency does better in safety in other areas than others might be doing.
That's the role of the safety person that we're going to create at the MTA, to make sure that there's cross-fertilization of information. Right now, there's a very good relationship between Joe Giletti and Carmen Bianco, and they're sharing information and resources where needed. So it's a good point, Mark.
And let me just add, Mr. Chairman, that the creation of a corporate level safety officer is a very important step. I commend you for it. The sooner we get that done, the better.
Okay, and no further discussion. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor?